Do anyone that you know, or maybe yourself, suffer from that debilitating condition we know as depression? Depression has been identified by the World Health Organization as the mental health condition of the 21st century. And it's not surprising because of our stressful lives and the extra sensory information that we are bombarded with every day in society, whether it be in digital form, noise form, or even amongst ourselves as human in crowded spaces and workplaces. The environments in which we now live are setting all of us up to firstly suffer stress, for some of us to then go on and suffer anxiety, and then from some of us we may then progress to the deeper condition we know as depression. Now, depression can be episodic, which means it shows up in episodes and then goes away, or it actually can be more persistent and more recurrent and more consistently a part of our life. But in its various forms, it all has really a single origin, and that is it's related to our autonomic nervous system and how our autonomic nervous system, firstly, for many of us, will go into a state of anxiety as a fight or flight state. And then from that place, we may collapse into the overwhelm of depression, which really is a hypo or low energy arousal state, where we go into a strategy of numbing out to our environment, and we lose in our body-mind key chemicals which we normally produce for positive mood and wellness, such as serotonin, dopamine, some endorphins, even oxytocin, and even the whole immune system response itself is affected when we go into sustained periods of living in this fight or flight state. And what happens is that the hormones and the various substances we produce, like the ones I've mentioned, get out of balance. If you've ever been to a doctor and had an SSRI drug prescribed for depression, then really what they've given you is a serotonin selective reuptake inhibitor. Now that fancy set of words really means that for the bit of serotonin, which is a feel-good mood chemical that you naturally produce in your body, what we're trying to do with that is we're trying to keep it in the system, in the body-mind system, for as long as possible without it being reuptaked by the natural processes of the body. So depression is classically treated by most medical and psychological traditions through medication such as antidepressants. Now that's a useful strategy when we're trying to stabilise a person, but there would be reasons to say it should not be a lifelong condition. We shouldn't have to be on antidepressants for the rest of our lives. Now it is certainly known that depression can be a symptom of other conditions such as trauma. And certainly where that's the case, we would treat the trauma and also treat the underlying symptomatic condition that we know as depression. But depression of itself is a body-mind condition. And so the real issue is looking at what is going on to cause a person to live in a fight or flight state. That eventually means the body-mind chemical balance changes. And we lose all the good stuff, such as the serotonin, the dopamine, and those other great chemicals, and end up living more or less with increased levels of stress hormones and stress chemicals, such as adrenaline, such as cortisol, such as norepinephrine, and a whole host of other natural substances which keep us more or less in a fight or flight arousal state. Now, if we live in these for too long, we end up with these health conditions. And this is the whole dilemma in both dealing with anxiety and with depression. So at IBMP, we help a person to see what's going on that is triggering them to go into their depressive states. And then we help them through their body and their mind to actually switch away from the fight or flight state where you lose all those good, feel-good mood chemicals that I mentioned, and instead are producing stress hormones instead. So we turn the switch, we go back to wellness and away from fight or flight, and then you start to naturally produce your own serotonin, your own dopamine, and we get you to a state where the symptomology, the symptoms of depression lift, and more or less you're more functional, you find that heavy black fog starts to lift. You naturally have more energy. That leads to more interest in life. That in turn leads to a more sociable way of being in life. And depressed people typically withdraw and isolate. That's one of the conditions of depression. So we help you to reintegrate into relationships, into family, into work life. And from there, from that emerging functionality and reintegration into your old normal self, we then look at what are the causes, what are the triggers for your depression. And that is the classical deep work of psychotherapy, looking at the causes of what's going on for you. So IBMP have a great track record with dealing with the various types of depression and anxiety. A lot of it, like I say, stems from trauma, whether it be developmental trauma or old childhood issues that were never resolved and were buried deep by the ego in the subconscious, and then show up years later to be dealt with. And then when they're not dealt with, lead to some of these emerging states of, firstly, anxiety, and secondly, depression. If it's a trauma issue we're dealing with, IBMP are classically trained in the latest neuroscience techniques of the trauma resolution from the Pat Ogden School of Sensory Motor and the Peter Levine work and other people like Bessel van der Kolk. These are all the leading practitioners and theorists and researchers around what is going on in the body-mind with regards to trauma. So whatever's going on for you that's creating depression in the life of yourself or a loved one, come and see IBMP and let's talk about what's going on for you and how we can help you to come out of that crippling condition that really is a dark night of the soul for those who end up in that space. So I'm Richard Boyd and I'm the CEO of Energetics Institute and IBMP. You can get us on our website or you can come to one of our free talks, which we now give regularly at the Speaker's Corner, which is at the Dome Leederville Cafe, and that is on the corner of Vincent Street and Oxford Streets, Leederville, and that is on the Leederville train stop on the Northern Railway line, and also close to the Mitchell Freeway, and so it's very accessible for wherever you are in Perth. So I hope to see you at one of our events or receive an email from you, or you can simply subscribe to our free monthly newsletters that we research and write ourselves. They're not cut and paste from other people's material, and they're not just a simple rehash out of a book. We are actively researching the latest trends, the latest knowledge, to give a clear perspective on key body-mind issues that face all of us in society in these modern day times. Anyway, I hope to see you soon at one of our events.